Have you ever been so invisible in your own home that your family wouldn't notice if you disappeared for days? Well, I found out exactly how invisible I was when I spent 3 entire days without a single bite of food, and not one person in my household even asked if I was okay. But here's the thing about being underestimated and ignored: it gives you the perfect opportunity to plan something they'll never see coming. By the time they realized what was happening, their bank accounts were as empty as my stomach had been, and I was already 3 steps ahead with a plan that would change everything forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Chen, and for the past 8 years, I had been living what most people would consider a nightmare disguised as a normal family life. At 34, I was supposedly the head of household finances for our sprawling ranch-style home in Maplewood, Connecticut, but in reality, I had become nothing more than an unpaid servant to my husband Marcus and his 3 adult children from his previous marriage. It wasn't always like this. When I first met Marcus at a corporate networking event in Hartford, he was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in building a life together. He was a senior partner at a prestigious accounting firm, drove a luxury sedan, and lived in a beautiful home that screamed success. His children, twins Ethan and Emma, who were 22 at the time, and his youngest daughter Chloe, who was 19, seemed polite and welcoming during our courtship. They smiled at the right moments, asked about my work as a freelance graphic designer, and even complimented my cooking when Marcus invited me for family dinners. The red flags were there from the beginning, but love has a way of painting warning signs in prettier colors. Marcus would often joke about how I was so much better at managing money than his ex-wife had been, how organized and responsible I was compared to other women he dated. At first, these comments felt like compliments. He trusted me with his finances, respected my professional skills, and seemed to value my input on major decisions. When he suggested I handle the household budget and bill payments after we got married, I felt honored that he considered me capable and trustworthy. The transition happened so gradually that I didn't notice I was being manipulated until it was too late. First, Marcus suggested I work from home more often to be available for the kids' schedules and household needs. Then, he convinced me to take on more of the cooking and cleaning duties because I was so much better at it than anyone else. Slowly, my freelance client base began to shrink as I had less time to dedicate to my design work, and more of my energy went into managing every aspect of the household. Ethan and Emma had both returned home after college graduation, claiming they needed time to find their footing in the job market. Chloe was still attending the local community college while living at home. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement for all 3 kids stretched on year after year. And somehow I had become their personal meal service, housekeeping staff, and financial manager all rolled into one. Marcus's income was substantial, easily 6 figures annually, and on paper, we were living comfortably. But managing someone else's money is very different from having control over your own financial destiny. Every dollar I spent had to be justified, every purchase questioned, every decision scrutinized. Meanwhile, Marcus, Ethan, Emma, and Chloe spent freely on their wants and desires, treating the household account like an unlimited resource. My own income from graphic design had dwindled to almost nothing. Between managing the household, paying bills, grocery shopping, cooking 3 meals a day, doing laundry for 5 adults, and maintaining the house, I barely had time to check emails from potential clients, let alone complete projects. When I tried to discuss setting boundaries or hiring help, Marcus would remind me how much money I was saving the family by handling everything myself, and how other wives would be grateful for such a comfortable lifestyle. The breaking point came on a cold February morning when I woke up feeling dizzy and weak. I had been working 18-hour days for the past month, handling tax season preparations for Marcus's business, deep cleaning the entire house for a dinner party Emma wanted to host, and trying to complete a logo design project for one of my last remaining clients. I hadn't been eating regularly, just grabbing whatever leftovers remained after everyone else had eaten, sometimes nothing more than a piece of toast or a handful of crackers. That Tuesday morning, I realized I hadn't had a proper meal in over 24 hours. My stomach was cramping, my hands were shaking, and I felt lightheaded every time I stood up. But instead of taking care of myself, I did what I always did: I dragged myself to the kitchen to start breakfast for everyone else. Marcus was already at the table, scrolling through his phone while expecting his usual spread of scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, and coffee. Ethan thundered down the stairs demanding his protein smoothie and avocado toast. Emma called from upstairs that she needed her lunch packed for her yoga instructor certification class. Chloe emerged from her room, asking if I could drive her to campus early because she had forgotten about a study group meeting. I moved through the morning routine like a robot, preparing everyone's meals, packing lunches, loading the dishwasher, and getting Chloe's clothes ready for her early campus departure. By the time everyone had left the house, it was nearly 10 in the morning, and I realized I still hadn't eaten anything. The leftover bacon was cold and unappetizing, the fruit had been completely consumed, and there were no more eggs left. I told myself I would eat something substantial after I finished the laundry and paid the monthly bills. But the laundry took longer than expected because Emma had spilled red wine on her white comforter and demanded I figure out how to remove the stains. The bills required extra attention because Marcus's business credit card showed several unexplained charges that I needed to verify before paying. By the time I finished those tasks, it was mid-afternoon, and I was supposed to start preparing dinner. I opened the refrigerator and found it nearly empty. Marcus had eaten the last of the leftover roast beef for his lunch. Ethan had consumed the remaining yogurt containers for his post-workout snacks. Emma had taken the fresh vegetables I had planned to use for dinner to make herself a salad before her evening class. Chloe had finished the cheese and crackers I had been saving for a quick meal. Standing in front of that empty refrigerator, something inside me shifted. Here I was, the person responsible for feeding everyone in this household, and there was literally nothing left for me to eat. No one had thought to save me anything. No one had considered that I might be hungry too. No one had even noticed that I hadn't eaten a real meal in over a day. I could have driven to the grocery store and bought more food. I could have ordered takeout for myself. I could have asked someone in the family to pick up groceries on their way home. But instead, I decided to conduct a little experiment. I wanted to see how long it would take for anyone in my family to notice that I wasn't eating, wasn't cooking for myself, and wasn't taking care of my own basic needs. Tuesday evening came and went. I prepared Marcus's favorite dinner of grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and wild rice. I made Ethan's protein-packed quinoa bowl. I fixed Emma's gluten-free pasta with the special sauce she preferred. I served Chloe her usual comfort food of chicken tenders and mashed potatoes. Everyone ate heartily, complimented the food, and went about their evening activities. No one asked me what I was having for dinner. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No one noticed that I sat at the table with just a glass of water. Wednesday morning arrived with the same routine. Everyone expected their customized breakfasts, their packed lunches, their specific dietary preferences catered to perfectly. I prepared everything they wanted, cleaned up their messes, and sent them off to their respective responsibilities. Still, no one asked if I needed anything. No one wondered why I wasn't eating. No one seemed to care that the person taking care of everyone else might need some care herself. By Wednesday evening, I was feeling genuinely unwell. My stomach had stopped growling and now just ached with a constant, hollow pain. My energy was depleting rapidly, and I found myself having to sit down frequently while doing household tasks. But I continued the experiment, preparing another elaborate dinner for everyone while consuming nothing myself except water and the occasional sip of tea. Marcus complimented the perfectly seasoned pork chops. Ethan raved about the homemade sweet potato fries. Emma appreciated the special dairy-free dessert I had made just for her dietary restrictions. Chloe asked for seconds on the garlic bread. And still, not one person noticed that I hadn't put food on my own plate. Thursday morning was when everything changed. I woke up so weak that I could barely stand, but I forced myself to go through the motions of preparing breakfast for everyone. My hands were trembling as I scrambled eggs, my vision was blurry as I sliced fruit, and I had to grip the counter to keep from falling over while I made coffee. But muscle memory and years of routine carried me through the tasks. As I watched my family eat the breakfast I had prepared while my own stomach remained empty for the third consecutive day, I realized something profound about my situation. I wasn't just being taken for granted, I was completely invisible as a human being with needs, feelings, and physical requirements. To them, I had become nothing more than a kitchen appliance, a convenient service that produced food and maintained the household without any consideration for what fueled that service. That morning, after everyone left the house, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. For the first time in months, I wasn't focused on household management or bill paying or meal planning. Instead, I began researching something entirely different. I started looking into financial laws about joint accounts and marital assets. I researched divorce proceedings and asset division. I investigated women's shelters and support networks. I explored options for rebuilding my graphic design business and establishing financial independence. But most importantly, I began to formulate a plan that would make my family notice me in a way they never had before. If they couldn't see me when I was starving and suffering, perhaps they would finally pay attention when their comfortable lifestyle began to crumble around them. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus, a professional accountant who prided himself on financial expertise, had given me complete access to every bank account, credit card, and investment portfolio in his name. He trusted me so completely with money management that he hadn't checked a bank statement or account balance in years. He simply assumed that his income would continue flowing into accounts, bills would be paid on time, and his financial world would remain stable because I was managing it all. What Marcus didn't realize was that his absolute trust in my financial management skills had given me intimate knowledge of every dollar that came into and went out of our household. I knew which accounts had automatic transfers, which bills were set up for recurring payments, and which investments could be liquidated quickly. I understood the family's spending patterns, their financial vulnerabilities, and their complete dependence on my organizational systems. Over the next several hours, as my stomach continued to ache with hunger and my body grew weaker from lack of nutrition, I began to see my situation from an entirely new perspective. I had been thinking of myself as powerless, invisible, and trapped. But in reality, I was sitting at the center of a financial web that I had built and maintained myself. I was the person who kept Marcus's business accounts organized, his taxes filed correctly, and his investments tracking properly. I was the one who ensured that Ethan, Emma, and Chloe could live comfortably without worrying about bills or financial responsibilities. My hunger was sharpening my focus in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Every rumble of my empty stomach reminded me that I was a human being with needs that deserved to be met. Every moment of weakness I felt emphasized how much I had been sacrificing for people who couldn't even be bothered to notice my suffering. Every dizzy spell reinforced my determination to change my circumstances dramatically. By Thursday afternoon, I had developed the outline of a plan that would serve multiple purposes. It would force my family to notice me as a person rather than a service provider. It would demonstrate exactly how much they depended on my invisible labor and financial management. It would create the circumstances I needed to leave this situation and rebuild my life on my own terms. And most importantly, it would ensure that I never again found myself starving and ignored in my own home. The plan would require careful timing, precise execution, and the courage to follow through even when the consequences became difficult. But as I sat there on my third day without food, feeling my body weaken while my resolve strengthened, I knew I was ready to show my family exactly what it meant to lose the person they had taken for granted for so many years. I would make sure they noticed the empty bank accounts just as clearly as they should have noticed my empty stomach. And by the time they realized what was happening, I would already be well on my way to a life where I mattered as much as everyone else around me. The transformation was about to begin, and this time, I wouldn't be invisible anymore. Thursday evening arrived with the usual chaos of everyone returning home and expecting their individual needs to be met immediately. Marcus burst through the front door complaining about traffic and demanding to know what was for dinner. Ethan arrived from his gym session asking where his post-workout protein shake was. Emma came home from her yoga class insisting she needed her special herbal tea prepared exactly the way she liked it. Chloe bounced in from campus wondering if I had remembered to pick up her prescription from the pharmacy. I stood in the kitchen, still weak from 3 days without food, and realized this was my moment of truth. I could break my silent protest, explain what had been happening, and hope they would finally understand how badly they had been treating me. Or I could continue with the plan that had been forming in my mind all day and use their complete obliviousness to my suffering as the foundation for something much more strategic. I chose strategy. Moving slowly but deliberately, I began preparing what would be their last elaborate meal for quite some time, though they had no way of knowing that yet. I roasted a beautiful leg of lamb with rosemary and garlic, prepared Marcus's favorite scalloped potatoes, made Emma's complicated dairy-free side dishes, fixed Ethan's high-protein vegetable medley, and baked Chloe's beloved dinner rolls from scratch. The irony of using my remaining energy to create this feast while my own body was crying out for nourishment wasn't lost on me, but I needed them relaxed and satisfied for what was coming next. As they devoured the meal I had prepared, praising the flavors and asking for seconds, I sat at the table with my usual glass of water and observed them with new eyes. These weren't my family members anymore, they were research subjects in an experiment about human nature and entitlement. I watched Marcus cut into his lamb without once glancing in my direction. I studied Emma as she photographed her artfully plated vegetables for social media, never wondering who had spent hours making them look perfect. I noted how Ethan consumed his meal with mechanical efficiency, treating my cooking like fuel for his fitness goals rather than a labor of love. I observed Chloe chattering about her day while completely ignoring the person who had made her comfortable evening possible. After dinner, as they scattered to their various evening activities, I began the first phase of my plan. I waited until Marcus was settled in his home office, Emma was in her room editing her yoga videos, Ethan was in the basement lifting weights, and Chloe was sprawled across the living room sofa watching Netflix. Then I quietly made my way to our bedroom and opened Marcus's laptop. Over the years, Marcus had shared all his passwords with me out of necessity for managing the household finances. He needed me to have access to transfer funds, pay bills, and handle his business banking. This level of trust had felt like partnership when we first married, but now I understood it for what it really was. He had handed me the keys to his financial kingdom because he couldn't be bothered to manage it himself. I started with reconnaissance, carefully documenting every account, every balance, every automatic payment, and every investment. Marcus's primary checking account held $47,000. His business account contained another $32,000. There were 3 savings accounts with various amounts totaling just over $90,000. His investment portfolio was worth nearly $400,000. The mortgage had only $48,000 remaining, and his retirement accounts were robust. On paper, we were quite wealthy, but I had never felt any security from this wealth because none of it was truly mine. My name was on the accounts as an authorized user for management purposes, but legally, everything belonged to Marcus. I had sacrificed my own career and earning potential to manage his money, his household, and his children, but I had built no financial independence for myself. That was about to change dramatically. I began by researching Marcus's business more thoroughly than I ever had before. As his unpaid bookkeeper, I had access to client contracts, vendor agreements, and financial projections. What I discovered was troubling but not surprising. Marcus had been inflating his billable hours to several major clients, charging for work that junior staff had completed, and claiming business expenses for personal purchases. None of this was illegal enough to land him in serious trouble, but it was unethical enough to damage his reputation if the right people learned about it. More importantly, I discovered that Marcus had been claiming me as a business expense. For the past 3 years, he had been deducting my consulting fees as a business cost, despite never actually paying me any consulting fees. He was essentially getting tax breaks for my unpaid labor while I received no benefit from my own work. The children's finances were even more interesting. Ethan had a trust fund from his mother's side of the family that he could access at 25, just 3 months away. Emma had been receiving monthly allowances of $1,500 that she claimed were for business expenses related to her yoga instruction, though she had yet to certify or earn any income from teaching. Chloe was receiving financial aid for school that covered her full tuition, yet Marcus had been paying an additional $2,000 per semester for educational expenses that seemed to go directly into her personal spending account. As I compiled this information, my hunger pangs were replaced by something much more sustaining, righteous anger fueled by clear purpose. These people had been living off my labor while building their own financial security and treating me like unpaid staff. They had made me invisible in my own home while benefiting enormously from my invisible work. By Friday morning, I had developed a comprehensive plan with multiple phases, each designed to wake them up gradually to exactly how much they depended on me. I would start with small disruptions that they might initially dismiss as oversight or accident, then escalate to more obvious problems they couldn't ignore, and finally reveal the full extent of my strategic planning. The beauty of my plan was that every step would be completely legal and entirely within my rights as the account manager they had designated. I wasn't planning to steal anything or break any laws. I was simply going to stop providing the free services they had come to expect and start requiring payment for the work they had been taking for granted. Phase 1 began on Friday morning after everyone left the house. I drove to the bank, still weak from not eating but determined to complete my mission. I opened a new checking account in my name only and deposited $50 from my wallet to activate it. Then I visited Marcus's business bank and requested all the documentation needed to remove myself as an authorized user on his business accounts. The process would take several days to complete, but I started the paperwork. Next, I went to our primary bank and removed my name from automatic bill pay authorizations for everything except the essential utilities and mortgage. The credit card payments, investment transfers, insurance premiums, and miscellaneous services would no longer be automatically processed. I left enough automation in place to keep us from losing the house or having utilities shut off, but everything else would require manual payment. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I worked on my graphic design business. I reached out to former clients, updated my portfolio website, and posted on professional networks that I was accepting new projects. My rates had nearly doubled in the time I had been away from the field, and I was shocked to receive 3 project inquiries within hours of announcing my return. When the family came home Friday evening, they found something unprecedented: no dinner preparation in progress, no table set, no familiar cooking smells wafting through the house. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, working on A logo design proposal, still having consumed nothing but water and tea for 4 full days. Marcus was the first to notice, though he approached it with confusion rather than concern. Rebecca, what's for dinner? I'm starving, and I have a conference call with a client in Tokyo at 8. I looked up from my computer screen and gave him a calm, pleasant smile. I'm not sure what you're having for dinner, but I'm working on a client project right now. There's plenty of food in the refrigerator and freezer if you want to make something. The expression on his face was priceless. Marcus had literally never prepared his own meal in the entire time I had known him. He stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language, then looked around the kitchen as if dinner might materially itself through wishful thinking. But you always cook dinner, he said, his tone suggesting I was failing to fulfill some sort of legal obligation. The kids will be hungry too. The kids are all adults who are perfectly capable of feeding themselves, I replied, returning my attention to the computer screen. I've decided to prioritize my business today since I have several new clients interested in working with me. Ethan arrived home just in time to hear this exchange, and his reaction was even more dramatic than his father's. What do you mean? You're not cooking? I have a very specific nutrition plan, and I need my meals prepared according to my macros. Then you should probably learn to prepare them yourself, I suggested without looking up. It's actually quite empowering to take responsibility for your own nutritional needs. Emma and Chloe appeared in the kitchen within minutes, drawn by the unprecedented sight of Marcus and Ethan staring helplessly into an empty refrigerator. Emma immediately began complaining about the lack of her usual evening snack preparation, while Chloe demanded to know why I hadn't started her favorite weekend casserole that typically took 3 hours to bake. I remained focused on my work, responding to their complaints with the same calm, pleasant tone. I'm sure you'll figure out something that works for you. I'll be working on this project for the next several hours, so please don't interrupt unless it's an emergency. The chaos that followed was both educational and entertaining. Marcus attempted to order takeout, only to discover that none of his usual restaurants delivered to our area on Friday nights without significant wait times. Ethan tried to prepare his protein shake and ended up covering the blender in half. The kitchen and expensive supplement powder. Emma discovered that making her complicated dairy-free smoothie required ingredients she didn't know how to find in our pantry. Chloe burned frozen pizza so badly that the smoke alarm went off twice. By 9 o'clock, they had managed to cobble together various unsatisfying meals, but the kitchen looked like a disaster zone, and everyone was frustrated with the experience. They kept glancing at me as if expecting me to jump up and fix everything. But I remained focused on my design work, occasionally sipping tea while ignoring their pointed sighs and muttered complaints. That night, as I finally prepared to break my 4-day fast with a simple piece of toast, Marcus approached me with a mixture of confusion and irritation. Rebecca, what's going on with you lately? You've been acting very strange. I finished chewing my first bite of food in nearly 100 hours before answering. I've been reevaluating my priorities and deciding to focus more energy on my career. I think it's important for me to rebuild my financial independence. But what about the household? What about dinner and managing everything like you always do? I'll still take care of essential tasks, I assured him, but I'm going to be more selective about how I spend my time and energy. I've realized that I've been neglecting my own needs and professional development. Marcus frowned, clearly uncomfortable with this shift but unable to articulate exactly why it bothered him. Well, just don't let it affect the important things. I have a big presentation next week, and I need everything running smoothly. I smiled and nodded, though we had very different definitions of what constituted important things and running smoothly. His definition involved me sacrificing my well-being to maintain his comfort. My new definition involved him learning to manage his own responsibilities like the grown man he was supposed to be. Saturday brought the next phase of my plan into action. I woke up early, had a proper breakfast for the first time in days, and left the house before anyone else was awake. I drove to a business supply store and purchased a lockbox, then visited an office supply company to have professional invoices printed with my graphic design business information. When I returned home, Marcus was in the kitchen looking frustrated. With a half-assembled coffee maker. He had apparently tried to make coffee and flooded the counter because he didn't know how to properly load the water reservoir. Emma was complaining loudly that there was no yogurt prepared with her usual mix of granola and berries. Ethan was demanding to know where his pre-workout supplements were, since I typically prepared his morning smoothie before he woke up. Chloe was upset that her favorite breakfast pastries weren't waiting for her as usual. I walked through their chaos with serene purpose, prepared myself a nutritious breakfast, and sat down to eat while reviewing the 3 new client proposals I had received overnight. My graphic design skills had apparently become even more valuable during my time away from the field, and companies were willing to pay premium rates for high-quality work. Rebecca, Marcus said, approaching me with coffee dripping from his shirt, I need you to show me how to work this coffee machine. I can't figure out why it's making such a mess. I looked up from my proposal review and gave him an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, but I'm working right now. Maybe you could watch a YouTube tutorial or read the instruction manual. His face reddened slightly. This is ridiculous. You've always helped with these things before. That's true, I agreed, but I've decided to start charging for my household consultation services. My time has become quite valuable since I've been getting so many new business clients. The kitchen fell silent. Everyone stopped their individual struggles to stare at me as if I had announced that I was moving to Mars. Emma was the first to find her voice. Charging? What do you mean charging? I reached into my bag and pulled out one of my freshly printed invoices, setting it on the table where everyone could see it. I mean that my time and expertise have value, whether I'm designing logos for corporations or managing household systems for family members. If you need my help with tasks that aren't essential to our basic living needs, I'll be happy to provide that service for my standard consulting rate. Marcus picked up the invoice and examined it as if it might be written in hieroglyphics. $50 an hour? For household help? That's actually quite reasonable for professional consulting, I explained, enjoying the look of shock on his face. My graphic design clients pay $65 an hour, but I'm offering a family discount. Ethan laughed, though it sounded more nervous than amused. You can't be serious. We're not going to pay you to help around your own house. That's absolutely your choice, I said cheerfully. I'm not requiring anyone to use my services. I'm simply establishing boundaries around my time and energy so I can focus on building my career. Chloe looked genuinely confused. But who's going to make breakfast and pack lunches and do all the things you always do? Whoever needs those things done will be responsible for doing them, I replied. Or if you prefer, you can hire me to do them at my consulting rate, just like you would hire any other professional service provider. The rest of Saturday was illuminating. I watched my family struggle with basic tasks they had never needed to learn because I had always handled everything for them. Marcus spent 2 hours trying to figure out how to pay bills online, since he had never actually used the systems I had set up. Emma discovered that grocery shopping required planning and decision-making skills she had never developed. Ethan learned that preparing his complex nutritional requirements took far more time and effort than he had ever realized. Chloe attempted to do her own laundry and ended up turning half her clothes pink. Meanwhile, I worked productively on client projects, took breaks when I felt like it, and prepared simple meals for myself without consulting anyone else's preferences or dietary restrictions. For the first time in years, I felt like my time belonged to me. Sunday morning brought the escalation I had been waiting for. Marcus's business credit card was declined when he tried to pay for gas, because I was no longer automatically paying the monthly balance. Emma discovered that her yoga studio membership had been suspended for non-payment. Ethan's gym access was blocked because his membership fees hadn't been processed. Chloe received a notice that her car insurance was about to lapse. The family meeting that followed was both predictable and satisfying. Marcus demanded to know why bills weren't being paid. I calmly explained that I had removed myself from automatic payment authorizations because I was no longer providing free financial management services. If they wanted me to handle bill paying, they could hire me to do it at my standard rate, or they could learn to manage their own finances. This is insane, Emma declared. You're holding the family hostage with these ridiculous demands. I'm not holding anyone hostage, I corrected. I'm simply establishing that my time and skills have value. If you don't want to pay for professional services, you're free to handle these tasks yourselves. But we don't know how to do any of this stuff, Chloe protested. You've always taken care of everything. Then perhaps it's time for you to learn, I suggested. These are basic life skills that most adults acquire in their early 20s. Marcus was growing increasingly agitated. Rebecca, this is completely unreasonable. We're a family. Families help each other without charging fees. I looked around the table at their frustrated faces and felt a moment of crystalline clarity about my situation. Marcus, when was the last time anyone in this family helped me with anything? When was the last time any of you asked what I needed? Or how I was feeling? When was the last time you noticed that I work 18-hour days to maintain everyone else's comfort while neglecting my own basic needs? The silence that followed was deafening. I could see in their expressions that they were trying to remember any instance of them showing concern for my well-being, and they were coming up empty. I spent 3 days this week without eating a single meal, I continued, my voice steady but filled with quiet power. 3 full days. Not one person in this family noticed that I wasn't eating. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one person cared enough to pay attention to the woman who spends every waking moment taking care of everyone else. Emma looked stricken. 3 days? But why didn't you say something? Because I wanted to see how long it would take for someone to notice, I replied. I wanted to understand exactly how invisible I had become in my own home. And now I know. Marcus was struggling to process this information. If you were hungry, you should have just eaten something. No one was stopping you. There was nothing to eat, I explained patiently. Every time I prepared food for the family, everyone consumed everything without leaving anything for me. Every snack I bought was eaten by someone else before I had a chance to have any. Every meal I planned was devoured by people who never considered that the person cooking might want to eat too. The weight of their selfishness was finally beginning to sink in, but I wasn't finished yet. I had spent months documenting every instance of being taken for granted, every moment of being treated like unpaid staff, every time my needs had been ignored in favor of their convenience. Now they were going to hear all of it. Ethan, I said, turning to face him directly, in the past year, I have prepared over 400 protein smoothies for you, each taking 15 minutes to make with precise measurements and specialized ingredients. You have never once prepared a smoothie for me or even offered to help clean the blender afterward. Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment, but I continued. Emma, I have spent countless hours researching dairy-free recipes, shopping for expensive specialty ingredients, and preparing complicated meals to accommodate your dietary restrictions. You have never once asked if I have any dietary preferences or offered to cook a meal that I might enjoy. Emma opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. Chloe, I have done your laundry, cleaned your room, packed your lunches, and driven you to campus hundreds of times over the past 2 years. You have never once offered to help with household chores or even to clean up after yourself. Chloe looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. And Marcus, I said, saving the most comprehensive criticism for last, I have managed every aspect of your financial life, your household, and your children's needs while you focused entirely on your career and your own interests. I have sacrificed my own professional development, my financial independence, and my personal well-being to make your life comfortable and successful. In return, you have treated me like hired help who works for free. The room was completely silent now, and I could see the guilt and shock beginning to register on their faces. But I wasn't done yet, because they needed to understand the full scope of what was about to change. Starting tomorrow, I announced, I will be working full-time on rebuilding my graphic design business. I have already secured 3 new clients, and I expect to be financially independent within 6 months. I will continue to live in this house and contribute to essential expenses, but I will no longer provide free household management, cooking, cleaning, or financial services. Marcus found his voice first, though it came out weaker than usual. Rebecca, you're overreacting. We can work something out. We don't need to make these dramatic changes. These changes aren't dramatic, I replied calmly. They're overdue. I should have established these boundaries years ago, but I allowed myself to become so focused on everyone else's needs that I forgot I was a person with my own value and potential. But what about the bills? What about meals? What about everything you usually handle? Emma asked, her voice tinged with panic. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine and powerful. What about them? You're all intelligent adults. You'll figure it out. As I left them sitting around the table, staring at each other in confusion and growing awareness of how much they had been depending on me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in nearly a decade, excitement about my future. The plan was working perfectly, and I was just getting started. Monday would bring the next phase, and by the time I was finished, they would understand exactly what it meant to lose someone they had taken for granted. More importantly, they would learn that the invisible woman they had been ignoring was far more powerful than they had ever imagined. Part 3, the victory, when the ghost becomes the master. Monday morning arrived with a palpable tension that had never existed in our household before. I woke up early, prepared a nutritious breakfast for myself, and settled at the kitchen table with my laptop to work on client projects. The familiar sounds of my family's morning routine echoed through the house, but for the first time in years, those sounds weren't my responsibility to orchestrate. Marcus emerged from the bedroom, looking disheveled and stressed. He had clearly spent the night lying awake, trying to process our conversation from the day before. He approached the coffee maker with the tentative movements of someone entering foreign territory, then stood there staring at it as if hoping it would operate itself through telepathic command. Rebecca, he said carefully, could you show me how to make coffee? Just this once? I looked up from my computer screen where I was reviewing a particularly lucrative branding contract. My consulting rate for kitchen training is $50 for a 30-minute session. Would you like me to send you an invoice, or do you prefer to pay up front? His face cycled through several emotions before settling on frustrated resignation. This is ridiculous, but fine. Show me how to make coffee. I spent the next 30 minutes teaching Marcus skills that most people learn in college: measuring coffee grounds, adding the correct amount of water, understanding the difference between various brewing settings, and properly cleaning the machine afterward. He struggled with concepts that seemed incredibly basic to me, and I realized that his helplessness wasn't an act or a manipulation tactic. He genuinely had no idea how to handle fundamental life tasks because I had been doing everything for him for so many years. When Ethan stumbled downstairs expecting his usual pre-workout smoothie, he found Marcus fumbling with coffee filters and me typing professionally on my laptop. The absence of his morning nutrition routine threw off his entire schedule, and he began opening cabinets and refrigerator doors with increasing desperation. "Where are the protein powders?" he demanded. "I need my smoothie before my workout, or my whole training program gets disrupted." "The protein powders are in the pantry where they've always been," I replied without looking up from my work. "The blender is in its usual cabinet, and the recipe proportions are written on the whiteboard next to the refrigerator." "But you always make it for me," he protested. "I don't know the exact measurements or timing." "Then I suppose this is an excellent opportunity for you to learn," I suggested pleasantly. "Or I could prepare your smoothie for my standard rate of $50 per hour. Most protein smoothies take about 15 minutes to prepare properly. So that would be $12.50. Ethan stared at me in disbelief. "You want me to pay you $12.50 to make a smoothie?" "I want you to take responsibility for your own nutritional needs," I corrected. "But if you prefer to outsource that responsibility, yes, my time has value and should be compensated accordingly." Emma appeared in the kitchen just as Ethan was attempting to operate the blender without securing the lid properly, resulting in protein powder explosion across half the counter. Her morning yoga routine required a specific herbal tea blend that I typically prepared for her, along with a particular arrangement of fresh fruit and gluten-free toast that accommodated her multiple dietary restrictions. "What happened in here?" she asked, surveying the protein powder disaster and Marcus's coffee ground-covered workspace. "And where's my morning tea?" "Your tea ingredients are in the cabinet marked Emma's supplements," I informed her. "The brewing instructions are on the package, and the timer is next to the stove." Emma looked genuinely confused. "But you always have it ready when I come downstairs." "I don't have time to prepare it myself if I want to get to the yoga studio on schedule." "Then you should probably wake up 15 minutes earlier," I suggested, "or adjust your schedule to accommodate the time needed for personal meal preparation." "Or," Emma said with a challenging tone, "you could just make it like you always do, and we can forget about this weird phase you're going through." I saved my work and closed my laptop, giving Emma my full attention for the first time in our conversation. "Emma, I'm curious about something. Do you consider your yoga instruction a valuable professional service?" She looked puzzled by the question. "Of course I do. I'm providing specialized knowledge and personalized attention to help people improve their physical and mental well-being." "And do you expect to be paid for that service?" "Obviously. My time and expertise have value." "Excellent," I said with a warm smile. "Then you understand exactly why I'm now charging for my specialized knowledge and personalized attention in managing household systems. My time and expertise have value too." The logic was so clear and undeniable that Emma couldn't formulate a counterargument. She stood there opening and closing her mouth like a fish before finally turning away to struggle with tea preparation on her own. Chloe was the last to make her appearance, and by then the kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Marcus had left coffee grounds scattered across 2 counters, Ethan had protein powder coating the blender area and part of the floor, and Emma had somehow managed to spill loose tea leaves from the counter onto the floor while burning her first attempt at toast. "What is happening in here?" Chloe exclaimed, staring at the chaos. "And where's my lunch?" "I have an important study group today, and I need my usual sandwich and snacks." "Your lunch ingredients are in the refrigerator," I replied, opening my laptop to resume working. "Bread is in the pantry, sandwich materials are clearly labeled, and there's a variety of snack options available. But I don't know how to make the sandwich the way you make it," Chloe complained. "And I don't have time to figure it out before I need to leave for campus." "Then I suggest you wake up earlier tomorrow to allow time for lunch preparation," I advised. "Or you could purchase lunch on campus like many other college students do." Chloe's face crumpled as if I had told her that gravity had been permanently suspended. "But you always pack my lunch. It's better than campus food, and it saves money." "You're absolutely right that homemade lunches are better and more economical," I agreed. "Which is why learning to prepare them yourself is such a valuable life skill. I'd be happy to teach you sandwich making techniques for my standard consulting rate." "You want me to pay you to teach me how to make a sandwich?" Chloe's voice had risen to nearly a shriek. "That's insane. What's insane, I replied calmly, is that a 22-year-old college student has never learned to prepare her own basic meals. But it's never too late to develop independence and self-sufficiency. As I watched all 4 family members struggle with tasks that should have been routine for any functional adult, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and genuine sadness. Satisfaction because my plan was working perfectly, but sadness because I realized how much I had failed them by doing everything for them for so many years. In trying to be helpful and caring, I had actually prevented them from developing crucial life skills and personal responsibility. By the time everyone finally left the house, the kitchen looked like a tornado had swept through it, and I had earned $150 in consultation fees from Marcus's coffee lesson and 2 brief tutorials I had provided to Emma about tea brewing and toast preparation. More importantly, I had established that my time and knowledge were no longer free resources for them to exploit. I spent Monday morning working productively on client projects while the house remained blissfully quiet. My graphic design skills had improved during my years away from professional practice, partly because I had been constantly problem-solving and managing complex systems in the household. The organizational abilities that I had developed while juggling everyone's schedules and preferences translated beautifully into project management and client relations. Around noon, I received the first panicked phone call. Marcus was calling from his office, and his voice carried a stress level I hadn't heard since the early days of his business. "Rebecca, there's a problem with the business account. My accountant is saying that some of the automatic transfers didn't process, and several client payments are showing as declined. Can you log in and fix whatever's wrong? I'm no longer managing your business finances," I reminded him gently. "I removed myself as an authorized user on Friday. You'll need to handle those issues yourself or hire a professional bookkeeper." There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again, and his voice had shifted to a more desperate tone. "But you know all the systems. You set everything up. I don't even know the passwords for half of these accounts. Then you should probably reset the passwords and learn to manage your own business finances," I suggested. "Or you could hire me to consult on business financial management at my rate of $75 per hour. $75? That's more than you charge for household consulting. Business consulting requires more specialized knowledge and carries greater liability," I explained. "My rates are actually quite competitive compared to professional bookkeeping services in the area." Marcus was quiet for several moments, and I could almost hear him calculating the cost of hiring me versus the cost of hiring a stranger to manage his finances. "How long would it take you to fix the current problems and get everything back to normal? To resolve the immediate issues and train you to manage the systems independently would probably require about 20 hours of work," I estimated. "That would be $1,500. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that I thought the call might have been disconnected. Finally, Marcus spoke in a voice that sounded defeated. "Fine. Can you start this afternoon?" "I have client commitments this afternoon," I replied. "But I could work on your project tomorrow morning if you send me a signed consulting agreement and a 50% deposit." After Marcus hung up, I prepared the most professional consulting agreement I had ever written, complete with detailed scope of work, payment terms, and cancellation policies. This wasn't just about earning money from my family, it was about establishing that my professional skills had genuine value and that my time deserved the same respect that any other consultant would receive. Tuesday morning brought a new level of household chaos. Emma called me at 7 in the morning, sobbing because she had forgotten about a yoga workshop she was supposed to attend and hadn't prepared any of the specialized snacks or materials she needed. Ethan texted me frantically because his gym had locked his locker for non-payment, and all his workout clothes were inaccessible. Chloe sent a series of increasingly dramatic messages about how she was going to fail her classes because she couldn't find her textbooks or notes in her disorganized room. I responded to each crisis with the same calm professionalism I used with my graphic design clients. I provided options, offered consulting services, and suggested solutions they could implement independently. What I didn't do was drop everything to solve their problems for them. The breakthrough came on Wednesday morning when I received an unexpected visitor. I was working on a logo design for a tech startup when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Marcus's business partner, James Morrison, looking concerned and slightly embarrassed. "Rebecca, I hope you don't mind me stopping by, but Marcus asked me to talk to you about this consulting fee situation. He's pretty stressed about the business account problems, and frankly, we're all confused about what's happening." I invited James into the living room and offered him coffee, which I prepared myself while explaining the situation from my perspective. James had always been kind to me during business social events, and I had actually helped him with some graphic design work for his side projects over the years, though I had never charged him for it. I had no idea you were managing all of Marcus's business finances, James said after I finished explaining. I always assumed he had a professional bookkeeper or accountant handling that level of detail. Marcus has an accountant for tax preparation and annual reviews, I explained, but I've been handling all the day-to-day financial management, client billing, vendor payments, and banking reconciliation for the past 5 years. James looked genuinely shocked. That's a substantial amount of work. Most businesses our size pay $30,000 to $40,000 annually for that level of financial management. I've been providing it for free as part of my household contributions, I said, but I've decided to transition to a more professional arrangement. Honestly, Rebecca, I think Marcus has been incredibly short-sighted about this. Your business financial management skills are excellent, and if you decided to start offering bookkeeping services to other companies, you could probably earn more than most people make in full-time jobs. This conversation with James planted a seed that would grow into something much larger than I had originally planned. I had been thinking about my consulting fees as a way to force my family to recognize my value, but James was suggesting that my skills could create genuine financial independence. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just establishing boundaries with my family, I would build a real business around the financial management and organizational skills I had developed. I would use my intimate knowledge of small business operations to offer services to other companies in Marcus's network. I spent the rest of Wednesday researching business licensing requirements, professional liability insurance, and market rates for financial consulting services. By Thursday morning, I had filed paperwork to establish Chen Financial Solutions as a legitimate business entity. Friday brought the culmination of everything I had been working toward. Marcus came home from the office looking more defeated than I had ever seen him. His business was struggling because of the financial management disruptions, his household was in constant chaos, and he was finally beginning to understand exactly how much he had been depending on my unpaid labor. Rebecca, he said, sinking into a kitchen chair, I need to talk to you about everything that's been happening. I saved my work and closed my laptop, giving him my full attention. This felt like the moment I had been building toward since that first day when I realized no one cared enough to notice I hadn't eaten. I've been thinking about what you said on Sunday, Marcus continued, about the 3 days without eating and how we never noticed. I keep trying to remember the last time I asked how you were feeling or what you needed, and I honestly can't. His voice was quieter than usual, and for the first time in years, he seemed to be really seeing me as a person rather than as a household management system. I think I've been treating you like you were some kind of employee, except I was paying employees better than I was treating you. I nodded but didn't speak, allowing him to work through his thoughts without interruption. James told me about your conversation yesterday, and he helped me understand something I should have realized years ago. The work you've been doing for my business alone is worth $40,000 a year. The household management, cooking, and everything else is probably worth another $30,000. I've been getting $70,000 worth of professional services for free. Marcus paused, and I could see him struggling with the mathematical reality of how much he had been taking advantage of me. But more than that, I've been treating the woman I married like she was hired help instead of a partner. I've been so focused on my own career and success that I forgot you had ambitions and potential too. This was the conversation I had been hoping to have for years, but now that it was happening, I felt surprisingly calm rather than emotional. The anger and resentment I had carried for so long had been replaced by clarity and purpose. Marcus, I said gently, I appreciate you recognizing these things, but I need you to understand that the situation has moved beyond apologies and acknowledgments. I've spent the past week rebuilding my professional identity and establishing financial independence. I'm not the same person I was 2 weeks ago. He looked confused and slightly alarmed. What do you mean? I reached into my bag and pulled out the business cards I had ordered for Chen Financial Solutions, along with a formal proposal I had prepared. I mean that I've established my own consulting business, and I've already secured contracts with 3 companies in addition to the work I'm doing for you. Marcus examined the business card and proposal with growing amazement. You did all this in 1 week? I did all this in 1 week because I finally had the motivation and freedom to focus on my own potential instead of everyone else's needs, I explained. It turns out that years of managing complex household and business systems had given me skills that are highly valued in the marketplace. This is incredible, Rebecca. I had no idea you were capable of this level of business development. His comment, though intended as a compliment, revealed exactly how little he had understood about my capabilities and potential. Marcus, I've been demonstrating these capabilities for years. The only difference is that now I'm being compensated for them. I opened the proposal and showed him the detailed breakdown of services I was offering to his business. Your company can hire Chen Financial Solutions to handle all financial management, client billing, and administrative coordination for $45,000 annually. This is actually below market rate for the scope of services provided, and it would give you access to professional-level financial management while supporting my business development. Marcus studied the proposal carefully, and I could see him processing the reality that his wife had transformed from unpaid household help into a legitimate business owner in the span of a week. And what about the household? What about our marriage? Our marriage, I said carefully, will need to be rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect and shared responsibility. I'm willing to contribute to household tasks as an equal partner, but I will never again sacrifice my professional development and financial independence to make other people's lives more convenient. That evening, I called a family meeting to present my final terms for our new arrangement. Ethan, Emma, and Chloe gathered around the kitchen table with expressions ranging from nervous to sullen. Marcus sat beside me, looking like a man who was still trying to understand how dramatically his life had changed. I wanted to update everyone on the new household structure. I began distributing printed copies of what I called the family responsibility agreement. Starting next week, each adult member of this household will be responsible for their own meals, laundry, transportation, and personal organization. Emma raised her hand as if we were in a classroom. What if we need help learning how to do these things? I'll be happy to provide training and consultation at my standard rates, I replied. Or you can use online resources, take classes, or learn through trial and error like most adults do. Ethan looked genuinely panicked. But I have very specific nutritional requirements for my training. I can't just figure that out on my own. Then you should probably hire a nutritionist, I suggested. Or you could hire me to design meal plans and teach you preparation techniques. Professional nutritional consulting is one of the services I'm now offering. Chloe had been studying the responsibility agreement with growing alarm. This says we each have to contribute $200 monthly for household expenses. But I'm still in school. Then you should probably get a part-time job like most college students do, I said. Or you could apply for student loans to cover your living expenses. You're 22 years old, which is well beyond the age when most people start supporting themselves financially. Marcus cleared his throat nervously. What about us, Rebecca? What about our relationship? I looked around the table at all four faces staring at me with various levels of shock, confusion, and dawning respect. For the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was looking at them from a position of strength rather than subservience. Our relationships, I said, addressing everyone rather than just Marcus, will be whatever we choose to build going forward. But they will be built on the understanding that I am a person with my own needs, goals, and value, not a service provider who exists to make everyone else's life easier. Over the following weeks, the transformation in our household was remarkable. Ethan hired me to design a nutrition plan and teach him meal preparation, but he also started taking responsibility for his own supplements and workout schedules. Emma began paying for professional meal planning services and discovered that she actually enjoyed cooking when it wasn't expected of her. Chloe got a part-time job at a campus coffee shop and found that earning her own money gave her a sense of pride and independence she had never experienced. Marcus's business contracted with Chen Financial Solutions, and the professional relationship actually improved our personal relationship because we were interacting as equals rather than as employer and unpaid employee. He started participating in household chores without being asked, and he began showing genuine interest in my business development and professional goals. The most surprising development was how quickly my consulting business grew. Word spread through Marcus's professional network about the quality of my financial management services, and within 2 months, I had more client inquiries than I could handle. I was earning more money than I had ever made in my life, and I was doing work that challenged and fulfilled me. 6 months after that first day when I realized no one had noticed I hadn't eaten for 3 days, I was running a successful business with 12 regular clients and a waiting list of companies wanting to hire my services. I had rebuilt my relationship with Marcus on terms of mutual respect and shared responsibility. The children had developed life skills and independence they had never possessed before. Most importantly, I had rediscovered who I was as a person separate from my role as a caretaker and service provider. I was Rebecca Chen, successful business owner, financial consultant, and equal partner in my marriage. I was no longer invisible. And I would never allow myself to become invisible again. The woman who had once been so ignored that her family didn't notice she was starving had become someone whose time was booked weeks in advance by successful companies willing to pay premium rates for her expertise. The empty stomach had led to empty bank accounts for my family, but it had also led to a full and prosperous life for me. Looking back, I realized that the 3 days without food had been the most valuable experience of my life, because they had shown me exactly how much I was worth and exactly what I deserved. Sometimes you have to become completely invisible before you can finally learn how to be seen. The best part was that my success had inspired other women in similar situations. I started receiving calls from wives and mothers who had heard about my story and wanted help establishing their own boundaries and building their own financial independence. Chen Financial Solutions expanded to include personal empowerment consulting, helping other invisible women discover their own value and potential. My story became proof that it's never too late to reclaim your power, establish your worth, and build the life you deserve. Sometimes the people who take you for granted need to lose access to your services before they can understand how valuable those services really were. And sometimes you need to experience being completely overlooked before you can finally learn to make yourself impossible to ignore. The woman who had once been starving for food and attention was now feeding herself and others with opportunity, respect, and the kind of success that comes from finally understanding your own worth. And that was a feast that satisfied me in ways that no meal ever could. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.